Welcome to the Unhurried Living podcast. We're sharing leadership conversations to help you develop unhurried rhythms of rest and work. We're helping you overcome hurry and make time for what matters most. And now, enjoy today's episode. Hey friends, welcome to episode 252 of the podcast. My name's Alan, and I'm so glad you've joined me here. I'm hopeful that our time together will help you rediscover an unhurried way of life and leadership. Today's episode is a little different. Instead of an author conversation or a chat with a few friends about some facet of unhurried living and leadership, I'm going to share an insight about working with God that has been especially important to me over the years. It's about the difference between process thinking and event thinking. This idea is one of the many gifts God has given me through mentors. Now, before I share more about this, if you're a new listener, welcome to the podcast. If you find these episodes helpful, would you please follow, rate, and review? And be sure to share this podcast with your friends. Now, let me share a few thoughts about this idea of process thinking. The Christian life is a process. It's a pathway. It's a journey. Working with God is too. Now, we're invited by Jesus into a transforming journey, week by week, month by month, year by year. God is changing us little by little over time. We can learn to cooperate with this process, or we can resist this process. The process itself is there just the same. Now, there's one passage that helps me with this kind of process thinking, and it's found in Paul's counsel to his friends in Galatia, when he says, "Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit." You know, we're alive because of God's Spirit breathing life into us moment by moment. Paul says that since we are alive thanks to the presence and work of God's Spirit, we should learn how to keep in step with the intentions and the guidance of that same Spirit. Now, this counsel isn't about some static moral stance. It's a pathway along which we can learn to more deeply commune and more fully collaborate with God. We can learn to cultivate an attentiveness and responsiveness to the Spirit's presence with us. This is a facet of what I'm calling process thinking. When we cooperate with God's process in our lives, what we do in a particular moment may not feel especially productive. For example, if I was completely clueless about agriculture and I saw a farmer pouring water at the roots of a tree, I might think that he's just making mud. But since most of us know how trees work, we realize that watering them is just one facet of how to help trees be as productive as they can be. So when I pray for people in my life and in my work, it doesn't often feel profoundly productive. It may look and feel like words spoken into the air. I mean, I know it's a good thing to do, but I don't always realize that it's an activity not unlike the farmer watering the tree. I'm cooperating with the work of God's Spirit in the lives of others. I'm inviting the gracious presence of God to bless the one for whom I pray. Now, in contrast to process thinking, there is event thinking. In this way of thinking, we imagine that our lives are a series of events to manage rather than a process in which events are interrelated elements. So we can end up becoming wrapped up in meeting after meeting, project after project, task after task. And we may miss how they relate to one another or where they are heading or what the goal of it all is. So how do events play into process? Well, instead of a long sequence of unrelated events that can overwhelm me, I learned to see all of the events of my life as a divinely interrelated process. I'm on a single journey that involves many encounters, many gatherings, many projects, and many tasks. I see the one process God has me in rather than the many events of that process as separate and unrelated things. But honestly, it's often a whole lot easier to be event-focused instead. Events often feel productive in the moment. I get something done and it feels satisfying. We accomplish something. Maybe we attract a group of people to participate in a thing we planned. Maybe we earn a little bit of income. And of course, these are all good and desirable outcomes. But process thinking provides the bigger picture of the eventual why for all of these events. Process thinking is about taking a longer view of productivity. One of the facets of the process God has me in is helping others become deeply rooted followers of Jesus. And we all know that takes longer than a few months. Now, in the final chapter of my book, An Unhurried Leader, I talk about working with God. And towards the end of that chapter, I share a process way of thinking called CEDAR. That's C-D-E-R. It's an acronym, and it stands for contemplation, discernment, engagement, and reflection. When we live with an event orientation to our lives and our work, we tend to overlook the elements like contemplation, discernment, and reflection, and we just fill our lives with more and more engagement. Do. One of my mentors called this do theology, and the pun is fully intended. So CEDAR is a way of cultivating a process way of thinking about my life and my work. I learned to cultivate a contemplative perspective. I learned to see my life and my work with a discerning heart. I learned to engage in my life and work from this contemplative and discerning frame, and then I grow in wisdom through reflecting on how God has guided me, encouraged me, counseled me, and what I learn in those moments. So making space in our way of living and working for contemplation, discernment, and reflection is, by definition, unhurried. It can feel less productive because we imagine that these kinds of practices take time away from doing actual work. But if we see our lives like the divine process that they are, well, then these practices are very much like the farmer watering a tree, weeding around it, feeding its roots. In the moment, it doesn't appear productive. But when the moment for harvest comes, there will likely be better fruit and more fruit. Now, by the way, this spiritual leadership insight about process thinking is one of the many that we'll be sharing with leaders who join a new training process that we're calling PACE. It's a 21-month certificate in leadership and soul care, and it's a kind of training that Jim and I have been offering in various forms for 30 years now. PACE will help you grow as a leader who cares for souls, beginning with your own. We'll help you move at the pace of grace, grow at the pace of transformation, and lead at the pace of Jesus. Jim and I are thrilled at the opportunity to gather with a community of 20 to 25 leaders who will walk through this learning experience together. You can learn more about this opportunity on our website at unhurriedliving.com/pace. I really do hope that you'll consider this as a fruitful next step in your own working with God journey. I hope you found these thoughts about process thinking helpful. In the next few episodes, I'll be talking with authors Tyler Staton, Jeff Crosby, and Kyle Eidelman. I can't wait to share those episodes with you. Now, if you'd like to receive more help from Unhurried Living, I invite you, as always, to join our Unhurried Daily email list. For 40 days, we'll send you a brief daily email that offers personal reflections from life and Scripture to help you take the next step in following Jesus' unhurried way. You can sign up on our website at unhurriedliving.com. We're honored to encourage thousands of leaders just like you. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Unhurried Living podcast. Join us next time to learn more about following the genius of Jesus' unhurried way of life and leadership.